Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time, we're headed to the American Southwest for some serious comfort food.
Oh yeah, some good eats.
Specifically, we're diving into green chili stew, and I am so ready for this.
Sounds delicious.
You know, New Mexico style?
Yes.
Like Hatch Childs. We got a recipe and a podcast episode from Fork and Fry to guide us.
Okay.
I am so excited. What do you say we jump right in?
Let's do it. I love Fork and Fry, first of all.
They're so fun.
They're so fun, and they always have such a good, positive vibe.
Yeah.
I just love how they present things.
Exactly.
And they make me want to cook.
Me too, which is what we're going to do after this.
Yes.
They really highlight how Hatch Childs are basically the heart and soul of this stew.
Absolutely, they're essential.
What makes them so special, though? Like, I know they're famous, but what sets them apart from other green childs?
Well, you know, it's really interesting. They're named for the town of Hatch, New Mexico,
Okay.
where they're grown, and the climate and the soil there is just so unique. It gives them a really distinct flavor.
Ah, so it's like terroir, like with wine.
It's exactly like terroir for childs.
But for childs.
Exactly.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And they could be mild or spicy, right? I've heard it kind of depends.
It totally depends on the variety.
Yeah.
But it's not even just about the heat. They have this incredible earthy, smoky depth
Okay.
that you just don't find in other childs.
I see. So it's the environment plus the specific type of childs, and that's what makes them like the royalty of Southwestern cooking.
Exactly. And that's why they're so prized in this green chili stew.
Okay, so besides the Hatch Childs, what else is going on in this recipe?
So Fork and Fry, they call for pork shoulder,
Hmm.
which I think is a brilliant choice because it's got that higher fat content,
Okay.
which is key here because when it's slow cooked, that fat renders out and creates this rich, silky base for the stew.
Oh, yeah. I'm guessing the pork gets super tender, too, after simmering in all that goodness.
It just melts in your mouth.
Oh, man.
And then, of course, you've got your onions for that sweetness and a little bit of complexity.
Yeah.
Tomatillos for that acidity.
Yeah.
Garlic, pungent aroma.
The essentials.
It's all about balancing those flavors.
And what about potatoes? Are those in there, too?
Of course. Got to have the potato for that hearty texture.
Yeah, for sure. And, of course, the spices. I'm seeing cumin, coriander, Mexican oregano, black pepper, bay leaves.
Yes, the spice blend.
Like, that's a whole other layer of flavor. I know those are all pretty common in Mexican Southwestern cooking, but is there like a historical reason they use those specific spices?
There is. It's actually a super interesting story that goes back centuries.
Oh, wow.
The use of these spices, it's rooted in indigenous traditions.
Okay.
And then blended with influences from Spanish colonization.
Oh, wow.
And trade routes.
Okay.
So it's a real melting pot of flavors.
Yeah.
And each spice plays a really crucial role in creating that authentic green chili stew taste.
So interesting. I mean, that could be a whole other deep dive.
Absolutely a deep dive for another time.
All right, so we've got our ingredients prepped and we're ready to cook. What's step one in this culinary adventure?
So the first step is searing that pork shoulder, and this is where the science meets the flavor.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Because browning the meat creates these things called Maillard reaction compounds,
Okay.
which I know sounds really complicated, but basically it's that delicious, savory, almost nutty flavor you get when you sear or roast meat.
Okay.
It's more than just cooking the pork through.
Yeah.
It's creating this foundation of flavor that's going to run through the whole stew.
So it's crucial.
It's crucial.
Not just for looks, but for the flavor.
Exactly. Maximizing that flavor at every stage.
So the sear is done. What comes next?
Then we add the aromatics, so your onions, chiles,
Right.
tomatillos, garlic, and we cook them until they soften and release their aromas. We're sweating the vegetables, basically.
Okay.
And this step lets the flavors kind of meld and become more pronounced.
Okay.
The potatoes go in at this stage, too.
Gotcha.
So you're getting that hearty texture.
So it's all about building on that flavor.
Absolutely.
Step by step.
And then this is where those spices come in.
Okay.
You add them to that hot pot, let them bloom in the oil, release their fragrant oils, and just intensify everything.
Oh, yeah.
Then the chicken broth brings it all together,
Okay.
creates the rich and flavorful base for the stew to simmer
I
in.
love that.
Fork and Fry emphasizes simmering for at least an hour,
Okay.
which I completely agree with.
The simmering's like the magic ingredient.
It is. It's where everything just comes together
Yeah.
and transforms.
It's like the flavors are all doing a slow dance in the pot.
Exactly.
Oh, good.
The collagen in the pork breaks down so the meat gets incredibly tender.
Okay.
All those flavors have time to marry and develop into this harmonious blend.
It's like magic.
It is.
So Fork and Fry, they mentioned this optional step if you like a thicker stew.
Oh, yeah.
Adding a cornstarch slurry.
Right.
I'm good with it on the thinner side. I'm a purist like that.
Sure.
But I get why some people like it thicker.
It's all about personal preference.
Yeah.
Some people enjoy that heartier, more substantial stew.
Yeah.
And a cornstarch slurry, it's a great way to achieve that
It's simple.
without messing with the flavor too much.
Yeah, totally.
It's a simple trick that can make a big difference.
Okay, so we've simmered, we've seasoned, maybe we've thickened. What's the final touch before we dig in?
Well, a sprinkle of fresh cilantro just adds a burst of freshness and color.
Okay.
And if you like, you can add a dollop of sour cream.
Yeah.
Provides that cool, creamy contrast to the heat.
Yeah, I love that.
It's all about those finishing touches,
Right.
elevating the dish, making it special.
And you know what I love about this recipe and Fork and Fry, they really emphasize this, is that it's all about experimenting.
Yes, make it your own.
We've covered so much, but there's still more to explore. So what other fun tips and ideas did Fork and Fry share about customizing this stew?
Well, they had some great tips for adjusting the heat level. Like if you prefer a milder stew,
Yeah.
they suggest using Anaheim or Poblano chiles
Okay.
instead of the hatch.
Gotcha.
Those varieties still have that nice earthy flavor,
Yeah.
but less of a punch.
Right.
Less heat?
Yeah, for the people who aren't into the super spicy stuff.
Exactly.
What about for those of us who like it hot, though? Do they have suggestions for amping up the spice?
Oh, yeah. For the heat seekers, they were go wild.
Awesome.
Explore all the chiles.
Yeah.
They mentioned chipotles for that smoky depth.
Okay.
Habaneros for a fruity heat.
Uh-huh.
And even ghost peppers for the truly adventurous.
Oh, my gosh. I love that.
Imagine the possibilities.
I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. Like a whole spice lab in your kitchen.
Exactly.
Playing around with all the different chiles. That's so cool.
And it's not just the chiles. Fork and Fries, they were all about getting creative with extra veggies, too.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
They mentioned things like corn, zucchini, bell peppers, even kale.
Oh, wow. So it's like a blueprint for flavor exploration. You can add whatever's in season or whatever you're feeling.
Exactly.
Like some diced bell peppers for a little sweetness and crunch.
Yeah.
Or some winter squash, for a heartier vibe.
Love it.
It's so many options. I'm starting to think there are a million versions of this stew out there.
I think you're right.
That's so cool, though, how you can take a traditional recipe and make it your own.
Right. It's like a testament to how dynamic food is
Yeah.
and how it changes over time and across cultures.
Yeah.
This recipe is a perfect example of how culinary traditions are passed down, through families with everyone adding their own little twist.
It's like a conversation through food.
Exactly.
That is so cool. And Fork and Fry, they had this great tip about leftovers.
Oh, yeah.
They said the stew tastes even better the next day.
Of course.
Why is that?
Well, as the stew sits, those flavors just have more time to meld and deepen.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Those spices we talked about, they infuse the broth even more. The meat gets super tender.
Uh-huh.
It's like all the ingredients just have a chance to get to know each other,
Yeah.
Yeah. And really harmonize.
Like a good stew needs time to, chill out and become its best self.
It does. Sometimes the best things in life, they need a little time
Yeah,
to reach their full potential.
that's beautiful.
And I think that captures the essence of Fork and Fly,
Yeah.
celebrating the joy of cooking and the importance of tradition, but also the endless possibilities for creativity in the kitchen.
I love that. They inspired us to look beyond the recipe and see the story behind the dish,
Yeah.
the cultural influences, and all the personal touches that make it special.
And speaking of personal touches, I think it's time we turn the conversation over to our listeners.
Yes.
We've talked about the history, the ingredients, the techniques, even some variations.
Uh-huh.
But now it's your turn to get creative.
Exactly. We want to hear from you. How would you personalize this green chili stew?
What unique ingredients would you add? What spice combos would you experiment with?
As we wrap up this deep dive into green chili stew, I'm just struck by how much depth there is to this dish.
Right. It's so much more than just a simple stew.
It's a story, it's culture, it's flavor.
It's a connection to the past, to different places, even to our own creative side.
And Fork and Fry, they really nailed it. They didn't just give us a recipe, they gave us a whole experience.
Absolutely. They walked us through those hatched child, the ingredients, the techniques, everything.
And they encouraged us to make it our own, to experiment, to personalize it.
Because that's what makes cooking fun. It's not just about following rules. It's about finding your own voice in the kitchen.
It's about exploring, discovering, and creating something that you love.
And you never know, you might stumble onto something amazing, some new twist, some secret ingredient that becomes a family tradition.
Right? It's exciting. It's the green chili stew at a starting point, a blank canvas for your culinary imagination.
So as we say goodbye for now, we want to leave you with a challenge.
Yes, take everything you've learned in this deep dive and get in that kitchen.
Don't be afraid to experiment. Try new things and make this stew your own.
Yes. And when you do share your culinary masterpieces with us,
Tag Fork and Fry and let us know what flavor combos you come up with.
we can't wait to see what you create and to continue this delicious conversation.
And don't forget, if you want to revisit the recipe or find more culinary inspiration, you can always visit Fork and Fry at www.forkandfry.com.
Until next time, happy cooking, everyone.